Would someone please explain to me why people think a philosophical discussion is like a game of Magic the Gathering? You know, if you want to have a philosophic discussion, but all you can do is throw books at each other, you have no business in this business. That is to say that philosophy is not an elaborate game of rock, paper, scissors. If I play an Aristotle card, you can't just say I counter it with a Wittgenstein card, and then you can't just say, or I counter a Wittgenstein card with a Chomsky card, and I counter Chomsky with a whatever something else silly card. You know, so often it seems that when I'm having philosophic discussions with people, they like to bring up ideas in the context of books, authors, and ideologues or ideologies. And that's no good. What you have to do is be able to understand those arguments to the point in which you can make the argument for yourself in the context of the conversation at hand. If you cannot do that, you have no business making the argument in the first place. Let someone else who understands it better make the argument. This is a point of some very serious contention on my part. I see a lot, even from people who I normally agree with, make the philosophic discourse into something of some mental masturbation thing that it is not. You know, I've talked with people who tell me that, you know, they agree with everything I say except the language I'm using. You know, it's like, you know, fine, if you can agree with what I'm saying, but you want me to change the word, then I'll change the word. But if you're wearing all drag, you're still a goddamn guy. Get over it. Likewise, I've been arguing with people, and the argument just sort of degrades into this discussion of how best to classify me. What am I? Who am I? This thing or that thing? And I suppose the only reason that would be important to the person I'm talking with is because they have rebuttals to this canned response and that canned response. But if I'm not subscribing to either of them, it's probably because I have a canned rebuttal to those also. But if that's like you, if that's all that you can do, if that's your two-dimensionality of your philosophic discourse, then don't waste my time. I want to make this worthwhile to you. This is not just a ranting video, okay? I want to give you some pointers on having a philosophic discussion. I don't care what the hell you're trying to argue. It could be my side, it could be against me, it could be against people who subscribe to things I subscribe to, that don't subscribe to, that sometimes subscribe. Doesn't matter. Number one, let's just get right into it. Number one, when you start a philosophic discussion, assume that you know nothing. It's a very humble thing to do, but it's real helpful because the premise, or working from that, or starting a conversation from that premise, opens you up to new considerations that you might not have thought about before. And if you use the conversation only, or you engage in conversation merely in the context of your present worldview, if your worldview is wrong, you're going to miss out on that. Because, of course, every argument that you make will be in defense of your worldview and not necessarily questioning your own worldview or whatever. And any argument that does question your worldview, the basics of it, you just either ignore it or you say that you don't understand the question. I love it when people do that. So first, assume that you know nothing. It's a good thing. Second, assume that the person you're talking to knows everything. Serious. This allows you to approach it from the perspective of just wanting to learn the logic intricacies of their worldview. But when you do that, you will, in fact, start asking them questions as to flesh out their worldview. And when you do that, that forces them to expose the subliminal rhetoric and the syllogisms, the subliminal stuff that they have swimming around in their head that they normally don't get to talk about, because everyone and their brother is out there making all these Magic the Gathering arguments against whoever else. It's just so lame, guys. It's not a hobby. It's real stuff. It's real stuff. So you start asking them about what it is that they believe, and you ask those kinds of questions that you had when you were a kid. Who am I? Why am I here? Why should I be here? What should I do? How did it all start? That kind of stuff. You do not ask these questions as leading questions. Don't think you are smart and think that people don't know a leading question when one is dropped. We all are perfectly aware of that. Leading questions are good in philosophic discourse, but not at this point. At first, all you want to do is just have the person establish themselves as thoroughly as possible. What will happen is that discontinuity will start to crop up in a worldview that doesn't have any business being believed in the first place. Not because you're smart or because they are stupid, but just because they never had the opportunity to think it out in such detail before, that they're just caught on the defensive all the time or making really lame arguments to people who disagree with them. And asking them to just truly explain themselves without judgment is something they normally don't get to do, and it can really shake them up when they find out that they are harboring absurdity. And really, that's the only way that you can bring their attention to it. You can't beat someone into the door. You have to just guide their hand to the doorknob. You know what I'm saying? If you want them to get through the door. When you see absurdity arise, not absurdity in context of your worldview, but absurdity in the context of precisely and only what they are saying, then you ask the leading questions to bring their awareness to that absurdity. And you lead the questions in such a way that they cannot help but admit the absurdity. It's not one of these really slick, sexy things where you just keep them in the dark the whole time until you go, "Pacha! Haha, I got you." No, it's not like that at all. Philosophic discussion is something humble. It's something worth a fair amount of reverence. We're talking about truth here. There is nothing more important in our world when you're talking about discussion in human discourse than to talk about fucking truth. So don't piss on it. It's worth your respect and it's worth your patience. And other people are worth your patience as well. So once you see absurdity, then you ask the leading questions, you lead them to the absurdity themselves, they witness it, and you ask them in one way or another, are you my witness? And if they say yes, then fantastic. If they say no, then no. But just because you can lead someone to an absurdity in their own ideas does not mean that your worldview is necessarily superior. You got to do the same thing. You can let them do the same thing to you. You can say, here, let me just explain my point of view, and then they can sit back without a worldview and just analyze what you are saying on its pure terms. That's the way it works, guys. You don't need Bibles. You don't need books or bestsellers. You don't need ideologues. You don't need names. You don't need Magic the Gathering cards. This is not like my rock card beats your scissors card, but now you have a paper card to counter my rock card, and oh my god, now I lose. It's such silliness. It's not like that. I'm talking about truth. And so approach it from that perspective, and I think you will find that the actual true philosophic discourse is something quite remarkable.